Hello everyone, I'm Yvonne, a children's librarian here at the Manchester City Library, and welcome to our winter elementary experiments. These are activities and crafts made for grades 1 through 6 that have a science, technology, engineering, art, or math component. We are continuing to have our in-person elementary experiments on the second Wednesday and the fourth Tuesday of each month at 3:30 p.m. in the Winchell Room at the Manchester City Library. We are posting these videos for anyone who is not able to attend, and they will be posted at the same time as our events. But if you are in grades 1 through 6 and you would like to attend and do our experiments in person, please register for our next elementary experiments on our website. In-person attendance will also guarantee that you will get a kit to help you complete our craft portion of our elementary experiments. Although any extra kits that we have will be available at the Children's Reference Desk while supplies last. So if you weren't able to go in person, but you can get to the library after this video goes up, just go ahead and ask to see if we have any extras. So with all of that out of the way, let's get into this week's elementary experiments. Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's elementary experiments. This video is going to be coming out on February 14th. So this week we are going to do some Valentine Science for our elementary experiments. Don't worry, it's not too lovey-dovey. It is definitely science and is even maybe a bit gloopy. So the very first thing we're going to do for our activity is going to be to make the best Valentine's Ooblek. So we're going to try a couple recipes and see what is best. So I'm going to go ahead and gather my supplies, and then I will meet you back here for that test. So Ooblek, as it's most commonly known, gets its name from a Dr. Seuss story, but it had been known by other names. When I was growing up, we made magic mud with a very similar recipe using cornstarch and water and food coloring. And I think that's how most people make magic mud, is with some cornstarch mixed with water and food coloring to make a really interesting and strange fluid that sometimes acts a little bit like a solid. Basically, what is happening in magic mud or Ooblek is that there are very, very small microscopic particles, in this case of cornstarch usually, that are suspended in our fluid, in our water. When we apply pressure to the Ooblek, if we hit it very hard or quickly, all of the molecules squish together and behave like a solid because instead of floating inside of the water, all of a sudden they're touching while everything else is like compressed and squished down. But as soon as the pressure is removed, or they have time to like squish apart from each other, then the molecules go back to floating and it acts like a liquid again. This is technically called shear thickening. So the question that we're going to deal with is not so much how does Ooblek work, because I've just sort of told you, but we want to know, can we make Ooblek out of something besides cornstarch, and is it better or worse than the original recipe? Now you can try it with a whole bunch of stuff, anything you want really, as long as you ask your adult and make sure not to make a mess. Don't send them to me if you do. I'm telling you now, you need permission first. So for us right now, we are going to try two substances. We're going to try our cornstarch, which is what is normally used, and we're also going to try our potato starch. I got both of these from a local supermarket. You can also definitely order one or both online as well, or just see if it's in your pantry. It might be. Okay, so What else are we going to need? We are going to need a couple of measuring spoons. We've got a 1/4 cup, and then we have 1 tablespoon. We've got 2 bowls with spoons. We're going to need some water. I have a jar here for mixing up our color. And then I also have some beads to just play with afterwards. You definitely don't need the beads or the food coloring for that matter, but it does make it more fun. Okay, so in our recipe, we're going to keep things mostly the same. If you have been to elementary experiments before, we might have talked about making experiments with controls and variables, right? So controls are all of the things that you want to keep the same in your experiment, and variables are the things that you change and that you test to see what happens when you make that change, right? So to make sure that we know what has caused the change or what our variable has done, we want to keep as many things consistent as possible. Hope that makes sense. So what we're going to do is we are going to keep our recipe constant for both our potato starch test and our cornstarch test. So what we're going to do is we are going to get 1/4 cup of our cornstarch. All right. And to keep from cross-contaminating, I'm actually going to wash this off in between because there's enough cornstarch on here that I don't want it to get mixed up with the potato starch. So I'm going to be right back. All right, I have returned, and we are going to take our potato starch and just do that 1/4 cup. And next what we're going to do is we are going to take our tablespoon and we're going to put 2 scoops, so that is 2 tablespoons into our jar. And then I am going to add the color. So I have these really nifty neon colors, and because we are doing Valentine Science, I'm going to make, I think, the regular cornstarch, which is our normal recipe. We're going to do that pink, and for the potato starch, we're going to do that purple. If you have the normal primary colors, that's going to be just like 1 or 2 drops of red, because red does usually lighten up to pink with food coloring if you don't use a lot. And then to make purple, it would be a drop of red and a drop of blue. All right, so I'm going to add 2 drops of pink, maybe 1 drop of pink into my jar. I'm going to shake it a little bit. You can also just stir it in. And then I'm going to add that into here. And then I'm going to repeat. And now what we're going to do is we are just going to mix both of them up. Now it's funny because as soon as I go to mix, I remembered that I have to mix slowly, because remember the non-Newtonian fluid, if you go in fast and try to move it, it's going to firm up into a liquid-like substance and not move at all. All right, I could do this more precisely, but I'm going to kind of eyeball it and add like another 1/2 tablespoon to each. Because remember, we still are trying to keep them even. I just want all of the powder to be able to mix in. All right, so now we've got both of ours mixed together. We had our cornstarch being pink and our potato starch being purple. And now we can take notes on how they're different. If you want to be extra scientific about it, I would suggest taking actual written notes or getting someone to help you with that, because it is good to be able to take note of these things as you're in the moment. For example, when I was mixing these two up, I noticed that the cornstarch took more time to mix together. And I don't know if that makes it a better or worse Ooblek, but it was a difference that I noticed. And so it's good to get these things written down, especially if you have more than just these two that you're experimenting with, because otherwise it can be very difficult to remember like which is which. Now you don't need to use beads or anything else to put into your Ooblek. You can just play with it with your hands. Although as you play, I would remind you to do so in an area where it is safe. This isn't as bad as slime in that it's not like as difficult to wash up, but it can still get into fibers and basically anything that is porous or has any sort of tiny hole. So I would definitely play on a table or something that you can wipe off. And similarly, if you are going to put anything into the Ooblek, like I have got these plastic pony beads that I'm going to use to drop into this, but because they are just plastic pony beads, I can just wash them off and like soak them in water to dissolve all of the extra cornstarch or potato starch. Yep. So if we drop our beads in, you can definitely see how when it hits the surface, it hits with like a thunk, and then it will kind of melt back in. So we can definitely tell that both of these, the cornstarch and the potato starch, do create a non-Newtonian fluid, which is, as we said, that fluid that can sometimes act as a solid when it's compressed. There are actually a lot of similarities. There's definitely some differences in texture, but I do definitely want to leave some up to you to sort of figure out which one you like better and the reasons why, right? Because as we said, if we're going to note our differences, then you will have to look back on your notes to look at the differences and then decide, okay, with these differences, which one do you think actually makes a better Ooblek or a better magic mud? And then, let us know what your decision is. I'm definitely going to have to think about my decision a little bit more. I'm not actually sure. There are bits about both that I like better. And they do have like a lot of similarities. So for me, I think that my decision on which is going to be better comes down to more of an opinion rather than which one is like acting more of a sometimes solid. But anyway, this is great fun, although a bit messy. So definitely make sure to have a sink ready for when you're done. The actual Ooblek itself, you're definitely going to want to throw away rather than put down a drain. A little bit down the drain is okay. Like as I said, I'm going to pull out my beads and I'm going to soak them and rinse them off. And so the bit that's on my beads or on my hands can go down the sink, but you don't want to put it all down the sink because it might clog it up. I'm going to do my cleanup, and then I will meet you back here for the craft section of our Valentine Science. For our craft in our Valentine Science, we are going to be looking to expand your heart, or in this case, we're going to see if we can blow up a balloon with some Alka-Seltzer tablets. So for this, if you are close to the Manchester City Library and you are in grades 1 through 6, you can come by and pick up a little kit while they last. And that is going to have our instructions on how to do this. It's going to have a bottle. It's also going to have a balloon and an Alka-Seltzer tablet. So what we're going to do first is we're going to blow up our balloon. And that's just sort of to stretch it out and make sure it will be able to expand a little bit easier, and also to give us maybe a little bit more of a drawing surface. Now we have our balloon with a little bit bigger surface, easier to expand. And now we're going to go ahead and use some Sharpies or other felt tip pens. So the felt tip is basically, you know, the kind that looks kind of fuzzy rather than a ballpoint pen. So I'm going to draw just your typical heart shape on the balloon, but you guys can definitely use your imagination. If you want to, you can try and draw an anatomical heart, which is basically trying to draw the heart that is actually inside of our body. So instead of the little heart shape, you know, it's the heart with all of the valves and pumps and stuff like that. Or really, you can do this with anything. I'm just going to do a heart because it goes with our theme and with it being Valentine's Day. But don't let that limit you guys, especially if you're not feeling in the lovey-dovey kind of mood. So it is harder to draw on a little balloon than you would think. But here I've got my balloon. I have filled our bottle almost all the way to the top to try and make sure that all of our carbon dioxide that's going to be released goes into the balloon rather than just into that space. So we're going to put our Alka-Seltzer powder or pieces into our balloon, and then we're going to put our balloon on top of our bottle and then dump everything in with a sealed system. That's the plan. All right, we've got our Alka-Seltzers on our balloon heart, and we're going to put this on top. See if this works. Cross our fingers. Okay, so we definitely got our inflation here. Not very much expansion. So I think I might try this one more time just for like us to see. And I think I'm going to try one with 4 Alka-Seltzer tablets. We probably won't be able to send that many tablets home in a kit, but just to see if we can get it like a bigger actually expansion. I'm really curious. So we're gonna try this one more time. Okay, here is our last test where we've got our bottle filled up just about all the way. We have our balloon ready to go, and we've got 4 pieces of Alka-Seltzer crunched up into smaller pieces. Then we are going to dump them all in. Okay, so that time I definitely got a better result. That's sort of more what I was hoping to get with these experiments. So even our very first experiment with the 2 Alka-Seltzers did show that there was a reaction, a chemical reaction happening with the Alka-Seltzers and the water. And basically, Alka-Seltzers do contain sodium bicarbonate, which you guys might recognize as baking soda. And it also has very small pieces of citric acid. And if you guys have ever played with vinegar and baking soda, you probably are familiar with what happens if you put baking soda in with an acid. And the reason why nothing happens when they are in tablet form is because the citric acid is just in pieces, so it is in a solid form. But when they're dropped into the water, the citric acid dissolves, and so that means that it can mix with the baking soda and make the reaction that forms sodium carbonate and carbon dioxide, the carbon dioxide of which is released in bubbles, and then we did catch with our balloon. So another part of this experiment that you can do if you get permission and have all the supplies at home is to test what happens when you use baking soda and vinegar in a similar way to inflate your balloon. Does it work better? Do you have to use more than would be in like our tablet? I think that would be interesting to know, but I will leave that up to you guys. So for now, I guess this comes to the end of our craft and of our experimentation with this. All right, everyone, I hope that you enjoyed this week's Valentine Science for our elementary experiments. And I hope that it made you feel a little bit loved, because we do appreciate you at the Manchester City Library. And remember that doing experiments together is a great way to show someone that you care, as well as to have some fun and learn a little something along the way. As normal, I will put some book recommendations at the end of this, just in case you're a little bit curious or just are feeling in a Valentine-y theme mood. Also, I will give you your sneak peek at next elementary experiments. This is going to be our last winter elementary experiments, the one that is coming up on February 27th. And then we are going to transition into spring. As of right now, we are still going to have the same setup in spring, so we are going to continue releasing our video formats on the same day that we have our in-person, and continuing to have our crafts at the Manchester City Library as long as supplies last, if you are in the area and want to grab one when you stop by. I do also want to remind everyone that the last week in February is our February vacation week, and we here at the library are doing quite a few extra things, so check our calendar. We are going to have an in-person elementary experiments during that week, as well as a party for the older kids and a couple of get-togethers for the younger kids as well. So definitely check that up if you are or have kids from toddlers all the way up to teenagers. But until then, goodbye.